Does this sound a bit out of date to you? Maybe you're more used to this now. Or even this. These are all different ways you can pay, moving from cash to EFTPOS machine to PayWave, then even Google Pay and Apple Pay, or you can simply hold your phone over the top of the payment terminal. But wait, if the present's not futuristic enough for you, how about digital cash, backed by the biggest bank of them all?
The Reserve Bank's proposing a new government-backed currency that it's dubbed digital cash.
To circulate alongside physical notes and coins, and to be used in the same way as cash, such as buying goods and services, paying donations, giving family members pocket money, or payments from the tooth fairy even.
At the same time, traditional banking facilities are disappearing from our small communities.
The big banks abandoning small towns across the country has sparked calls from dozens of mayors for an official inquiry.
And in some places, cash is still king because it has to be.
The Reserve Bank is wanting to trial bringing back cash deposits and withdrawals in rural communities. It says smaller regional communities are lacking commercial over-the-counter or ATM cash services, and acknowledges that cash is more convenient and has lower costs for individuals and businesses.
Kia ora, I'm Tom Kitchen, and today on The Detail, the Reserve Bank's plans to fill the gaps left by banks deserting small communities by increasing the supply of old-style money, and its potential venture into the world of cryptocurrency or digital cash. And as Mike Hosking says,
how revolutionary and, game-changing is all of this if it came to fruition tomorrow?
I'm speaking to three people today: New Zealand Herald Business Editor-at-Large Liam Dan, and representatives from the Reserve Bank and the small bankless community of Reefton. Let's start with Liam. I asked him to try and explain simply, what is digital cash?
Very difficult to describe simply, and sort of doubly hard because you would normally sort of go to cryptocurrency and Bitcoin and those things, which again is not that easy to describe simply. On the other side, you've also got, we know the money that we use nowadays, ordinary New Zealand money, is mostly digital these days anyway. It's we're phone banking, internet banking. We don't really see the stuff unless we have to go to a money machine somewhere. So it's somewhere in between. The central banks around the world are kind of playing catch up, having seen where things are going with cryptocurrency. They want, sovereign versions of that digital money. They won't work exactly like cryptocurrencies. They'll be backed by a Reserve Bank. Because it's fully digital, you can transact directly with the Reserve Bank. You can own this digital cash and do all your transactions, and you don't need to have a commercial bank involved.
So what could New Zealand's version of digital cash look like? That's what the Reserve Bank's trying to figure out at the moment, and wants to get the public's views, even though it might not be in place until the start of the next decade. Ian Wolford is its head of money and cash, aka the man who looks after our notes and coins.
You could just think of it as exactly the same as Apple Pay. It'll be a digital way, or tapping your card or whatever. There'll be apps, so no difference. You'd reach into your pocket and either pull out cash or your Apple Pay. So in that sense, it wouldn't feel particularly different for the consumer.
But how does it differ? Obviously, Apple Pay is linked to my card, which is linked to my bank account with my bank.
Yeah, there are a few reasons why it's different from money in your bank account, and this is one of the things that people get a bit confused about. They say, well, what's the difference? I have a digital form of money. One of the key differences is that this will be central bank money, so it's backed by the government, and what that means is that you're not taking the same credit risk. So you might operate entirely in a digital ecosystem, in a sense, where your salary goes into your bank account, you pay with Apple Pay or your scheme card or whatever, and you never actually touch cash, which is the only form of currently available central bank money. What you've got in your bank account is a claim on an institution. That dollar value in your bank account is not backed one for one with actual dollars. Say your bank got into trouble, or you were concerned about your bank, the thing that people invariably do and you see this around the world all the time, is they go to the bank and they want to take out their money in cash because they trust it, They understand the value of it. It's fully backed by the government. So that's one key point.
So when you say that the money that we have in the bank, there's some kind of risk to that, so there's a potential to lose that when there's not the potential to lose that if you have digital cash?
That's right, conceptually. I mean, I would make the point that banks in New Zealand are well capitalised, and we're not suggesting that there is an imminent problem with banks. So just making the point that there is a difference in the credit rating between private sector banks in New Zealand and the Crown.
And the Crown's much better, is it?
Yeah, it's more highly rated. That's right. So you don't have the same kind of credit risk. There's a couple of other things that we think are different, and one is that we're designing privacy into it in the sense that the Reserve Bank will not be able to see or monitor the individual transactions. What we're talking about here is a two-tier model. So Reserve Bank owns the digital platform. The digital cash sits on its balance sheet, but you will access this cash through a third-party provider. It could be your bank, or it could be some other form of financial institution that isn't a bank.
What would you say when people claim...
Essentially, it's a government-backed version of crypto, of course.
On one level, that's right, or potentially right, in the sense that it will have some technical similarities. But the key point of difference that we talked about earlier is the government backing.
Back to my conversation with Liam Dan. The thing about cryptocurrency, right, a lot of people don't really know what it is and might hear that word and think, oh, it's a bit dodgy, right?
Well, it mostly is.
Yeah, that's the thing. That might scare people.
I've sort of begrudgingly accepted over the last year or so that Bitcoin is here to stay. Bitcoin is a speculative investment class. It's been accepted into Wall Street and in the banking world. They have ETFs, funds that trade, cryptocurrencies. And so it's sort of comparable to something like gold. You can invest in it, it goes up and down, but it's not really being used on a mass level for transactions. And where it is, it's been pointed out by a lot of people that it's black market stuff because, again, it doesn't go through a bank. Cryptocurrencies, some of them are absolute Wild West and extremely volatile, but even your Bitcoin and things are really, really volatile. You can't be sure of the value within a tight range from week to week, which is something that you really need in a functional currency for transactions, for actually doing business. You need to know that when you buy something for this many dollars, it'll still be worth roughly, the dollar itself will still be worth roughly the same next week.
Ian from the Reserve Bank tells me the bank's plans are still in the early stages.
At this point, what we're doing is we're consulting on how it will look and feel, and that enables people to think about it and give us their feedback. But it also allows, for example, the banks and other people in the financial system to think, okay, well, if that's what the Reserve Bank's thinking about, this is how we want to respond and give feedback to the Reserve Bank. So this is a multi-year project. We're talking about this going live or being available around about 2030. This is something that's globally going to happen in all countries. It's not a question of if, but when. And I think the way that we characterise where we're at in the process is we're not at the bleeding edge, but we're very much a fast follower.
Because New Zealand has historically been quite innovative in the payment space, would you say?
Historically, but it has been a long time since I think we can lay claim to that. I think the FPOS system, we were probably the second in the world that had that sort of point-of-sale functionality. I think it was Australia first and New Zealand second, and we used to be quite proud of that. But I think one of the things that we're saying is that we're just not seeing that kind of innovation in the New Zealand payment system anymore. The banks are quite conservative and slow-moving. You've got a fintech sector out there who's kind of champing at the bit.
Fintech is short for financial technology. Seems simple, right? Well, the term fintech includes a huge range of products, technologies, and business models that are changing the financial services industry.
Innovation is certainly not something that we can lay claim to now. And in fact, we'd say that the New Zealand payment system is 10, 15, maybe even 20 years behind other developed countries.
Really? Oh, so what's the rest of the world doing? If you look around the rest of the world, what do you see that you like?
Well, for example, what's called a faster payments system, where transactions are happening much, much faster, almost instantaneously. Open banking's been a real success in a lot of other countries.
Open banking allows customer data to be shared between financial institutions, so companies can offer alternative deals.
It's cheaper, it's faster.
So you can instantly move your money from a bank account to a bank account. I mean, at the moment in New Zealand, you can only do that online if you're in with the same bank. Is that right?
That's right, and it takes a little while. I mean, it's within an hour or so if you're sending money to someone in the same bank, but it takes longer if not. Whereas that peer-to-peer or person-to-person transaction is much more common overseas.
We only got weekend banking sorted, didn't we, say?
Just recently.
You'll be able to make and receive electronic payments every day of the week, including weekends and public holidays. This means no more waiting until Monday if someone transfers you money.
So we're a long way behind.
But you're not trying to get rid of cash, are you, Ian? That's not the aim here.
Well, of course, the conspiracy theorists will tell you it's all about getting rid of cash so you can control everything and turn the power off, and we're living in a 15-minute city and the end of the world is coming, and all the other crap that you read on social media.
Absolutely not. No, we are at pains to say that cash will be available for as long as people want to use it. But it is something that people are concerned about. Thanks for asking the question. We say at every opportunity that this is not designed to get rid of cash.
Yeah, well, I was really surprised in a survey you did recently to see the huge decline in the amount of people that use cash every day.
Yeah.
Decline from 95% in 2019 to 57% in 2023. Why? I think the pandemic would have a lot to do with that.
The pandemic's got a lot to do with it, for sure. It changed the way people transact. The other thing that we think is going on is the reduced access to cash. So banks' footprint around the country is shrinking. Their branches are closing. Lower half of the North Island, almost over the last 20 years, almost 50% down on what it was. Around about 30 or 40% down in the rest of the country. So you have to travel further to ATMs, to branches. It's harder to get cash out. That not only affects consumers trying to get cash out, but it affects retailers as well. There's definitely an element of preference where people choose to transact digitally, but there's also an element of choice being taken away from people. They don't like that. In every engagement we have, even if people are using cash a bit less often or a lot less often, they want the option of being able to use cash. So we definitely are not predicting the death of cash. We think it'll be around for a long time.
That's
and it will definitely be around for as long as people want it.
Yeah, we're talking about that and the access to smaller towns and people who don't have access to cash because the banks have gone and the ATMs have dried up. You're looking at doing some cash trials in smaller towns around Aotearoa. What will that involve?
What that involves is inviting towns to apply to be a part of the trial. So towns between 1,000 and 10,000 in population who have lost a lot or all of their banking services. And then we will select 8 or 9 towns and we will put cash back into those communities by, for example, putting in a smart ATM, and what that means is that will be able to not just give out cash, of course, but also enable people and retailers to deposit cash into the machine, to make change for coins, etc., to recycle that cash so that it's available in the community via the machine. But importantly, also to reimburse retailers for giving cash out. One thing that surprises people is about a third of where Kiwis get their cash from at the moment is from retailers. But retailers pay a disproportionate amount of the cash system by our estimates, up to about 3/4 of the cost of the cash system, and that's because of the costs involved of the cash handling. I think that's one of the reasons why you see some retailers saying, well, we don't want to take cash because it's all getting a bit too hard and a bit too expensive.
There's also a security van service, yeah?
Yeah, that's right. So with the cash and transit firms coming in and just clearing cash in more far-flung regions more regularly. What it will look and feel like will be a discussion with the communities. I mean, it could be within a smart ATM, within an existing retailer, within some secure public space. So we'll just need to work, because that'll be a case-by-case with the communities that we end up working with.
The Reserve Bank hopes the trials will be live in some places by the end of this year. What does Liam Dan think about the scheme?
It looks pretty solid to me. I mean, they're not throwing everything at it, but they are doing the work, and they're doing the work that needs to be done, so they know what New Zealanders want. They're very big on consultation. There's no doubt about that. So they're several rounds of consultation. I think it's paced about right. You honestly don't want to be right out at the cutting edge of these things. Everybody freaks out because of is it Venezuela, who adopted one of those cryptocurrencies, tied their national currency to it, and thought that was going to be the future. Absolute disaster.
It's a digital currency backed by oil, and it's called the petro. The goal is for the petro to raise hard currency for Venezuela and function as a payment method for foreign suppliers. It's a workaround for sanctions imposed by Washington last year.
And you could see it was going to be a disaster. And so they need to reassure people that this isn't that, but they need to be up with the latest technological ways of moving money around, or the idea of money around, so that if the world changes, we can change with it.
Well, on that, do you think there'll be any time in our lifetimes where physical cash will be a goner, we just won't have it?
Never say never, but I mean, you can tell from the way the Reserve Bank's talking that they still believe in it as an idea, and that it will stay for the foreseeable future. All the work they're doing is absolutely around keeping it alive.
Now, for one of these towns that has no bank,
a Reefton resident says closure of the town's only bank means those without transport or a computer will struggle to manage their finances. The West Coast township is among others around the country affected by the Bank of New Zealand's decision to close down 38 of its branches.
The BNZ in the West Coast town shut 3 years ago. John Bowgen is the chair of the Business Association, and he runs a lot of the businesses in town, like the pub. He spent most of his life in Auckland. He co-founded the Dress Smart shopping mall chain, then moved to Reefton, where there's a bit of contrast. It doesn't really have many shops at all. But he loves it. He calls it the last true town of New Zealand.
We're big enough that we have everything that you need. We've got, a world-class cinema here. We've got 2 supermarkets. We've got council building, visitors centre, all the essential shops that you need, including the distillery, of course, Reefton Distillery. Can't let that go by. And then, of course, we've got art galleries, and quite a lot of artists have moved into town or carried on being here. If I said it takes me less than a minute to get to work, and that's only because I've stopped to have a chat to someone, it's big enough, it's got everything you need, but it's small enough you know everyone in town.
Well, it's got everything you need apart from a bank, maybe.
Well, that's a good segue, isn't it? Yes. So we did used to have we had a couple of banks here, actually, 3 banks. The BNZ would have been one of the first BNZs in the country, and directly across the street was the National Bank. As years went by, you had the Westland Bank, which then morphed into the ASB Bank, and then the BNZ relocated, and then relocated again down to the visitor centre. And at that stage, it was the only bank left in town, and there just wasn't the business in the bank's view to merit having a branch. And despite a lot of arm twisting and begging and cajoling, they did decide to leave. They did it with good grace. They paid up quite a healthy amount to enable us to get through to finding a solution. They also left behind a very, very good top-of-the-line ATM sitting in another building, but essentially the same ATM you get in those banking hubs. So full cash handling. So we have 2 ATMs in town. The ANZ one is, your basic one that you get everywhere else. The BNZ one is a U-boot one. So you see all the various business owners in town down there standing, feeding the money in. The only thing we can't get is change. Initially, it was a real bugger, but, people adapt. And so the businesses now have change groups. And if anyone's off to Greymouth, which is only an hour away, they will pick up change for anyone who wants it. The word goes out, I'm in Greymouth, anyone wants change. And they just internet transfer the funds, the change gets made up, and somebody picks it up and comes back with a satchel full of coins.
So people have got used to that now. It's not a real hassle?
In some ways, it's actually even easier.
Really?
You don't have to leave your business because if you're getting change. So assuming that one person in the group of 10 is down a grey mouth, well, that means that instead of 10 people going down to the bank to get their change, you've now got one person doing it.
I heard people, when the bank was taken out, people were quite concerned that there would be more cash in the area and in these tills in the businesses, and it would be more risky for the businesses.
It's going to result in businesses carrying probably a lot more cash in their tills, which is kind of putting it out there for anybody of evil intent. And I'm deeply concerned.
That was an assumption. There's always the chance that that could happen because you are feeding money into a machine standing on the curb. The reality is there's more cameras you can poke a stick at, the same as there are in a bank branch. So whether you're standing in a bank branch or you're standing out on the street, it's the same risk, I guess. One thing that we have in Reefton is a large number of cameras all connected to the police station. So we, touch wood, have a very low crime rate.
Is cash commonly used? Are there any businesses that don't use cash or don't want to use cash, for instance?
I can't think of anywhere on the West Coast where you can't use cash. It's a bit of a West Coast tradition, I think. And a lot of people like to use cash just so that perhaps, wary of who's interpreting the information, I guess. So you can quietly go about your business without everybody knowing where you're being. And it's a lot easier.
So this comes to what the Reserve Bank are hoping to do with some cash trials. They're looking at putting this out later on in the year, so getting a few more kind of cash spaces, places where you can get cash, or security vans which come quicker to pick up cash in town. Do you think that would be helpful?
Oh, absolutely. And we did talk at some point about that with the RBNZ, but as they said, they're just one of many banks. If there was some central organisation that could handle that and they come and pick up your cash and take it away without having to go and stand in the machine, that'd be wonderful. If that was the case, then you're going to be better off time-wise than you would have been even before the bank closed. So if somebody's going to come along an armoured vehicle and snatch your bag from you and keep driving down the road, well, that's great.
And what about using digital cash in Reefton?
It would certainly have some merits. Everyone carries a mobile. It would be a lot easier. But New Zealand, we hate giving away on stuff we've always had, don't we? And cash has been something we've had right from day one. It's the gold standard, as it were.
Physically handing over cash makes you think about what you're doing probably more, and it's a bit intangible and esoteric. It's a bit like vinyl. It's a bit like someone saying, well, why do you spend all this money for these vinyl records? And you can sort of talk about sound quality, but actually there's ways to get just as good a sound quality from digital now if you really want. And I guess it's a psychological thing, but that can actually be real, and that can affect the way that you spend, and it can affect the the way that you interact with the economy. And I think the Reserve Bank is certainly interested in all of that stuff and is sort of factoring those kind of things in. So I think that's good.
That's it for today. The Detail is funded through RNZ and NZ On Air. This episode was engineered by Jeremy Ansell. It was produced by Alexia Russell. Thanks to our guests Liam Down, Ian Wolford and John Belgian. I'm Tom Kitchen. Mā te wā.